Okay, so in this particular video we're going to have a look at this whole issue of debt here and the reasons why countries have to go into debt, and therefore what you would argue are the good reasons for having debt, but then also the problems that exist in many economies when you have a large amount of debt. And as it says right here, that it's the servicing or the repayment of that debt, the annual repayment of that debt, which is actually the most important problem with debt, because usually debt is taken in US dollars, and so any country has to earn dollars in the markets through usually their exports in order to repay those debts, as it were. So we're going to have a look at these reasons why possibly debt is good, and then we'll consider the other problems with debt. So the first thing, as I say, is that debt is an inflow on the financial account. It's some sort of credit. Okay, it's a form of borrowing, if you like, and it can fill the currency gap as well. However, you've got to recognise that the initial inflow of the debt is a large sum of money, but then the repayments on that debt will go out year after year after year, and so it's an ongoing debit on the balance of payments account. But if that borrowing has been taken to fund investment in things like infrastructure, for example here, public utilities, power generation, water, sewerage, it is going to have a direct effect on living standards. Now, you need at this point to refer to the video that I've done on infrastructure and the problems in economies if you don't have good infrastructure, and so debt is a way of paying for that infrastructure, and so you need to link these two topics together. And if there's an essay about debt, then I think I would extend my analysis to say it depends on what the debt is for, and if it's infrastructure, then it has a lot of positives for the economy. So that's important that you can talk about that. It improves efficiency, fewer power outages if you've got this power generation. We talk in the other video about infrastructure, about the effect on firms and the efficiency of firms being able to get goods to market quicker and that sort of thing, and the ability to use ports and airports to bring international trade to the party, as it were. Now, the other thing is that debt can be used to fund public goods like health and education, and so you understand, hopefully from last year, that a good like health and education, not only has it got positive externalities, but it is also underprovided in the market because it's got that problem of non-excludable non-rivalry, and so you can argue it's a public good. And so if you take the debt in order to invest in health and education, then you get a higher skilled workforce that can attract FDI. It adds directly to the HDI index, remember. So the Human Development Index is GNI per capita measured in PPP, and then some measures in equal measure, 33% for each of these measures of health and education. The better education, healthcare, leads to higher wages. If you're better educated, if you're healthier, you're going to stay and work longer, you're going to work longer hours, etc. And so that is going to improve possibly the savings gap. You can get higher education, higher income, you start to move out of that subsistence level of income, and so you can start to save a little bit, can help the savings gap. But if you're borrowing to fund in transport, infrastructure, those sorts of things, then, as I say, bring in the idea about linking it to trade, the advantages of larger markets. Productivity is, forced upon you because you have to compete in against bigger firms within the marketplace. It can improve the geographical mobility of your workers, the immobility of your workers, and efficiency. You're getting your products to the market quicker, you're getting your raw materials in quicker, and that sort of thing. So in a sense, it's very linked to the whole issue of what is wrong with an economy if it doesn't have good infrastructure. So obviously debt has those good effects if it's taken in order to fund investment in these things. So therefore, what are the problems of debt? Well, as I've said to you just now, the main problem with debt is the servicing of the debt, and so you've got to be able to service that debt. That's one thing. The implications then, there's annual repayments. Those repayments have an opportunity cost. So if they're making payments on their debt, then the government can't be making, spending money on health and education and those things. Big one here, if the interest rate is high, if the interest rate starts to rise within your economy, or if the exchange rate falls, and we'll see this in a minute, that if the exchange rate falls, then it's going to add to the problem, because you have to give up more of your currency in order to get the dollar that you need to make the repayments. And those repayments are a drain, and so of currency. And again, the currency gap could come in there as well if you wanted it. But I think one thing to really get hold of with debt is what is known as a debt crisis, and there's lots of debt crises going on in the world economy. Just look at the Financial Times at the moment. We're February 2023. Search Pakistan debt crisis, Pakistan, China debt, and you'll find lots of articles about the issues that are going on in Pakistan at the moment. But you could run through a load of countries in that way. You could look at India, you can, as I say, you can look at Argentina. Sri Lanka is a really good one to consider with this. But a debt crisis is really something that happens when you have some natural disaster. So within the country you might have a natural disaster, and therefore you can't export as much goods and services, and so if you're not exporting as much, you're not earning those dollars. It could be because of an increase in interest rates going on, so you've had to borrow more. The cost of borrowing is higher, and so therefore there's more going out of the country. But the big thing to talk about is the slump in commodity prices. So in other words, if there's a downturn in the world economy, income's falling, therefore the demand for your commodities, particularly if you're a commodity-based economy, is going to go down. Therefore, you're not earning as much dollars, you're reducing your foreign exchange earnings. That causes your currency rather to fall, because remember that exports lead to a demand for your currency. So demand for your currency falls, the exchange rate falls, and the key thing to get to is that each dollar repayment here takes up more and more of your domestic currency. So as I say, Pakistan's a good example to think of at the moment. Reading recently, they literally have 3 weeks left of foreign exchange reserves in order to buy imports. After that, they can't buy any more imports. And one of the arguments that's come up here is that very often developing countries are encouraged to expand in these commodities when times are good. So in order to develop, the IMF and governments try to use that as an expansionary policy, if you like. They expand their production of commodities in order to make hay while the sun shines, as they say, to earn those dollars. And so it's an encouragement to keep producing commodities and not to get into different types of industries. And obviously within that, as say, you've got the problem of the Dutch disease, when things are going well, the exchange rate is rising, and you can't easily go into other industries. So that again is a problem. So hopefully from this you'll see that there's good reasons for debt. Link it to infrastructure though. And now there's problems of debt, and there's lots of issues going on in the world economy. So one of the things I would end up with saying is this one, is that your key question is to ask, has that borrowing helped the country to raise its economic growth? So if it has done that, if it's enabling it to bring in infrastructure, get economic growth going, etc., etc., it can then lead to development, but it can also lead to the ability to repay the debt. So there's no harm in taking debt if it leads to higher economic growth, fiscal dividends, taxes coming in, and therefore the ability of the government to repay the debt. But if it's for other sources, or if you're having to wait a long time, which you often do with infrastructure, to get the benefits, then obviously debt's going to be a problem. So hopefully that gives you a clue on what you'd have to argue if there's a good question about, is debt the main problem that is facing developing countries?